Welcome everyone to this masterclass of the LNOD Roundtable and the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. For those of us who are meeting for the first time, I'm Dr. Sujaya Banerjee. I'm the CEO of Capstone People Consulting and also the founder of the LNOD Roundtable and the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. So for those of you who have always been following us and attending the very valuable masterclasses, welcome back. This one is special. This one's going to be extremely important, especially for those of you who are making concerted efforts to build diverse and inclusive workplaces. But we'll come to that only in a bit. I want to spend a couple of minutes to take you through the LNOD Roundtable and the Women Leadership Forum of Asia, our credo. And I invite you to join us, to join this movement called the Women Leadership Forum of Asia, and do help us popularize the forum and its activities to your friends and to your colleagues. So one more time, all those joining us on LinkedIn Live or even on YouTube, welcome to this masterclass of the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. It's well-timed, extremely relevant, and I would recommend that you take copious notes given the quality of speakers and practitioners that we've lined up for you today. So very quickly to tell you about the Learning and OT Roundtable, we started this forum about 12 years ago. This is a curious group of learners. We started with 13 and we now have over 25,000 members who come together to who have come together to build easily Asia's largest knowledge forum and practitioners who are interested in driving change, learning, and innovation inside their own organizations. We've had chapters across the country, which now in the current scenario allow us to be able to basically have one unified platform online that includes literally everyone, no matter which part of the country you are in. And this also gives us the stellar opportunity to integrate so many international members who until now, when we were an in-person forum, had to make the effort to be able to fly down and spend and all of that to become part of our initiatives and our activities. So I'm really excited with what the online forum allows us to do, and you'll soon hear more on this space as we bring more of our activities in a more sort of unified online knowledge platform. Move forward. The Women Leadership Forum of Asia was created under the aegis of the Learning and OT Roundtable. This is a 10-year-old forum, and we created this when we were just beginning to talk about the opportunity that you have of building an equal society and the opportunity that we have of building, equal opportunities organizations by, making the effort to be able to integrate all kinds of talent, not just to expand the talent pool, but to be able to give opportunities of employment to a whole lot of marginalized groups who've been until then ignored. We've helped organizations, we've been activists around this, that we've been evangelists around this to be able to influence organizations, to be able to integrate different groups of talent. We've worked across business organizations, government, the police, academia, researchers, to be able to truly create an inclusive forum that works on inclusion and inclusive cultures across all kinds of diversities. So this forum has obviously gained huge amount of momentum during the pandemic with a whole host of very timely masterclasses and platforms for important conversations and communication that we created during that time. And we're keeping up momentum even as we start our 2022-2023, the new performance year, for all those who are enthusiastic and have been doing incredible work in the space of diversity and inclusion, to be able to have the opportunity to listen to 4 leading practitioners today, to be able to benchmark your own journey, to be able to understand what people who are ahead in the game are doing so distinctively well, and for basically creating the inspiration that this platform has continuously created for practitioners and for academics and for students and for everyone who's been an advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have 17,000 plus members, so I recommend those who are joining us for the first time do come in and become part of this journey called the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. The cost of the membership is less than the cost of of a meal in a restaurant. So I recommend strongly that you use your resources well to become part of this. A lot of the masterclasses, like the one you're attending today, is for free. There are absolutely invaluable research studies that you can access. There are a whole lot of resources you can access through the forum. Um, the WLFA and the Elenodi Roundtable have academies that offer you really outstanding capability building programs and certifications, all at a at the price of, like I'm saying, nothing less than a meal. And so I'm going to basically encourage all of you to come in, become part, spread the word to your networks and to your associates, so that we can keep up with this very vibrant, this very relevant, this very timely forum called the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. Move forward. This is our very stellar governing council. We've got Ritu Anand of TCS. We've got Akil Basrai, who's a legend, who's worked for very many organizations, including Shell and IBM. Myself, I have over 3 decades of experience in the corporate world. I work in the space of diversity and inclusion and in the space of change and learning, leadership capability building across organizations. My organization's called Capstone People Consulting, like I pointed earlier. Adil Malia, who leads the firm, again, brings in very rich experience from organizations like Coke and GE. Rajesh Kamath, who's been a consultant with Cerebrus for several years and now leads the Chanakya Foundation. Gautam Chenani of JSW. Manu Wadhwa of Sony Pictures. Bosco, who is basically runs an absolutely outstanding organization called Conscious Development, and is an academic, is a leadership and change expert. Deborah Hume, who's a neurosciences expert and a leadership expert, operates out of the UK, but is very interested in being able to contribute to the momentum of learning and diversity and inclusion in India. And Raj Upadhyay, who runs Power Excellence and works very extensively, including in the space of emotional intelligence and leadership with the Indian School of Business, among other organizations and other leading schools that he actually participates in. So this is our very stellar governing council, all of them available to be able to support your journeys, and we do everything, all the wonderful work we do under basically they're the wind below our wings, and we do everything under the aegis of these very outstanding and remarkable professionals. Move forward. Diversity balance hiring solutions. We started this last year, which is to be able to help organizations, especially on the back of the pandemic, to be able to expand their talent pool by being able to attract diverse talent. We barely announced this. We'll be working with a whole host of very leading organizations, helping them find diverse talent, outstanding, top-notch, diverse talent. There is a misconception within many organizations, or a myth, if you want to call it that for various kinds of positions that you're looking for, you will not be able to find diverse talent. We're here to bust that myth for you, and we work extensively with organizations to be able to help you find diverse talent. For those of you looking to be able to bring in diverse talent within your organization, expand your talent pool, create more sustainability of talent within your organization, bring alternate perspectives, growth, and innovation into your organization, reach out to us and let us know how it is that we can support you. We also come with a very unique skill set in terms of the constitution of our of our governing council members, who are all available to be able to support the movement of diversity and inclusion within your own organization. We offer pro bono coaching services to the diverse talent that you hire from the diversity balance hiring program. If you're hiring large groups of people, there are boot camps that we've decided and executed for various organizations. Please reach out if you're looking to be able to hire diverse talent. Don't wish away the problem or the challenge that you might be experiencing, or the pushbacks that you're experiencing. Use the immense experience and the connections that we have through the forum to be able to help you find high quality diverse talent. Move forward. And right, the best transformation stories of Asia post COVID-19. That's recommend all of you participate. This culminates into the best transformation stories of Asia post COVID-19 seminar and awards. So there are 13 categories in which you can actually participate. Please come in. participate, reach out to our people. I've mentioned some of the names here. Reach out to them. Note the numbers. We'll try and put them on your chats as well, so that you're able to reach out to people and share your positive stories of transformation within your organizations. It's just been such splendid stories of change, and using the opportunity of this of the pandemic and the adversity. So do share this to inspire more change within other organizations. So I recommend strongly that we've got a deadline somewhere mid-May, but which we're willing to be able to extend to the end of May to have more organizations participate. I urge mid-size, small-size organizations to not worry about the competition. Come in, share your story. We've been notorious for having really small organizations win the awards in the past. So this is not just for larger organizations, this is for everyone. And I recommend that you come forth and participate in the best transformation stories of Asia post-COVID-19. With that, delighted to present to you what you came for today, which is Diversity and Inclusion Outlook 2022-2023. And to help us present this to you, we have the privilege of inviting 4 practitioners. We're going to start with Preeti DeMello of TCS. Each of them will speak for about 15 minutes. And Preeti leads D&I for TCS, and I've known her for a while. It is a delight, a joy, and a privilege to listen to Preeti. And she's not using any slides. She's just going to talk to all of you, but I'm sure she has gems there. And in keeping with her learning session, I'm going to ask you to be able to take down notes. So keep your pen and your books handy as you listen to these 4 very outstanding practitioners that we're presenting to you today. Next, we'd be delighted to be able to have, Tuba Mudassir of Citi, who's basically, I would imagine, making her debut with the Women Leadership Forum of Asia this time. So welcome, Tuba. We've had Citi on this forum before, but we haven't had you. So really delighted to be able to have you on board. And Tuba's bringing in the incredible success stories of diversity and inclusion from Citi for all of us here today. The next, session of the next speakers is someone who I admire greatly. We have Aman Dal of Yum Brands, who again has an incredible story to be able to share, and I'm sure many perspectives to be able to inspire many of you. They're all going to share their own journeys and their own perspectives on what they see as incredible opportunities, especially in these very sort of disruptive, but full of opportunities times that we really exist in. Last but not the least, we've got Shatabdi Ghosh of John Deere India. Again, John Deere's had some incredible journey. I have witnessed some of it myself, but they are palpably an organization already inclined and predisposed to being diverse, full of, be very, very prone to equity in the way in which they deal with people, the decisions, the policies, the architecture that they've created inside the organization, and the incredibly I'm envious of their culture, which is so positive and so oriented, flexible, adaptable. They've grown many times over in a very short period of time, and I'm positive that a large part of this is because they have palpably done what is required at the right time, with their head and their heart in the right place. We had announced Shobha Pandey, who basically is the regional head of talent and D&I, to be able to speak today. But in her place, we have an incredible replacement speaker who's basically very, very instrumental in the D&I journey, works directly with Shobha. Shobha had a personal exigency, so Shatabdi Ghosh has agreed to be able to step in and speak on behalf of John Deere India. Before I have the 4 of you come here to speak and start, we're going to do this as round robins, one on the back of the other, and then we're going to try and pick some of the questions that you may have. So keep posting your questions, by the way, on LinkedIn, so that we're able to pick those and, at least I think we'll have an opportunity to be able to perhaps ask one question each to each of the speakers. But today is about being able to understand, what are the journeys of organizations who are ahead in this incredible movement. Many of them, having done some very, very incredible thinking So huge integration of what they do and their business strategy within the organization. They've made their move. It's a movement. It's a culture change movement, and they've been able to bring it great momentum, which they're able to sustain over a period of time. This is going to be an incredible treasure trove of learning experiences from all four of them. And as you start and embark on 2022, 2023, the performance year, this is just ideal. We're right in the center of, rather, the end of April, and you can still readjust the sales for this year to be able to start looking at your own journeys with a new lens. Before I hand over to Preeti, I have to say that from the time we started this forum, right, I'm incredibly thrilled to see so many organizations who were at very nascent stages 10 years ago having made huge strides and created teams. They have the architecture to be able to look at building diverse and inclusive workplaces. There's been lots of progress in terms of being able to create some policies and programs. But overall, when I look at 2022, and I'm just going to put my view out there before I pass on the baton to all four of you, is that we've ended up, by and large, while I know that there are always outliers to the story, we've by and large ended up with a lot of programming of diversity and inclusion within organizations. So I think that by and large, we've chosen the easier path. We've allowed this to become a series of programs. We're yet not moving the needle on being able to drive serious change within the organization. We're still not being able to go beyond patronizing and actually questioning and being able to coach and counsel our leaders to be able to take the lead in being able to build diverse and inclusive cultures and not just run diverse and inclusive programs, diverse and inclusive initiatives. And I think that we've got to be able to move forward from there and do the real hard work. And I think 2022, 2023 is a clarion call for being able to do that, which is do the tough work around building this as a culture and not as a series of programs. Now, I know this conversation about culture versus program, or basically compliance versus culture, been going on for a while, but I think we're still not doing the real hard work, which is about being able to drive change with our leadership. I must say, in pockets, I see some really large organizations, old economy companies doing some absolutely incredible work in this space. But we've got four organizations here today, and I'm hoping that we will be able to spark, trigger the inspiration to be able to do the real work around diversity and inclusion. My sense is that that's yet to really happen. We're just scraping the surface yet. Even 10 years down the line, and I'm counting this as 10 years because we started this forum 1 decade ago. But I'll leave it onto very inspiring practitioners who are picking up that baton and trying to push that needle. And I'm hoping you're going to take down copious notes and go away inspired from this conversation. So over to you, Preeti Mello of TCS.
Thank you, Sujaya. Thank you very much. And thank you for that bold statement that I think globally we haven't really quite moved the needle from programs to culture. Uh, we all have good intent. We all want to make a difference. And yet at the same time, there is potentially more work to be done when you are speaking to the idea of culture change. Let me share with you how we have done it, and I also do want to put out a caveat to say D&I is a journey, it's a process. It's a process of sometimes incremental and sometimes exponential improvement. And yet at the same time, it is somewhat like the story of the imaginal cells that you continue to grow, you continue to improve, you continue to get better than you were previously. I don't think there's an end to this journey. So achievement would be to say, where were we at? Where are we today? Now, within TCS, I have to say that I am and we are vividly aware that as an organization, we are all about our people. And the organization views the capacity to create resilient corporate culture through embracing people, keeping a steadfast focus on human values, all very important pieces of who we truly are. There is this quote by Werner Erhard. He was a medical doctor at one time and also an expert in early cognitive neuroscience, especially neurodynamics. And this is one of my favorite quotes. I use it in my signature, but it sort of defines some what Sujaya said and what I'm going to continue to say for the next few minutes. He goes as this. He says, it is important that you get clear for yourself that your only access to impacting life is action. The world does not care what you intend, how committed you are, and how you feel or what you think, and certainly has no interest in what you want and don't want. Take a look at life as it is lived and see for yourself that the world only moves for you when you act. And thus, this D&I conversation, today and over and above, needs to go beyond intent and go beyond the warm and fuzzy nature of saying we're doing the right thing or how noble, and so on and so forth. D&I is a human, social, and a business imperative. There is no escaping it. There is no escaping the fact that equity and inclusion actually inform our everyday lives. Now, within my organization, and from my perspective, I would say that diversity and inclusion is, on one level, constantly evolving. It's a dynamic area of work. And I'm going to speak to you about how I see it in sort of stages of maturity. The first stage is somewhat of a, well, a lot of workspaces have passed through this stage, and this is the why of moving into inclusion. It's a stage of rationale, building through data analysis, experience sharing, strong voices, advocating or leading change. Wonderful, very important, but not the final. The winning formula, however, for workplaces that are building a case for D&I was mapping it to positive business outcomes. Because without that, the organizational space is not going to speak to change. Um, I like to call it the diversity dividend, because without that, like I said, change will not happen. The first stage also saw the focus on gender a great deal. I remember not too long ago when we spoke of D&I, there was a lot of conversation around gender, specifically women. And gender also sort of spoke more to women than otherwise. And inclusion in general and integration of women at the workplace was potentially the most important criteria. The second stage where I believe most of us as organizations are right now. This is the how to create workplaces which are inclusive in nature. We do this through protective policies, we do this through proactive hiring strategies, creating an aware and supportive ecosystem, engaging with community, building a culture of inclusion through employee resource groups, developmental initiatives, conversations like these. Now, the scope of diversity has expanded to include other diversity segments, gone beyond gender, and now we speak to race, we speak to ethnicity, we speak to sexual orientation or LGBTQ, we speak to physical diversity, speak to neurodiversity, we speak to generations, veterans, and so on and so forth. I'm currently in the US and we're talking about AAPI, which is the Asia Pacific and Islanders. So we're talking about human beings. The scope has to keep expanding. And I'm glad we're at stage two because we're speaking to more and doing more with it. It's also expanded, the idea is also expanded beyond inclusion and equality. There's a lot of focus on equality earlier. Now we speak more to equity, we speak to belonging, we speak to justice. And of course, diversity and inclusion continue to be a part of the dialogue. The focus now, to Sujaya's earlier point, that we need to do more than programs. If we're talking about culture change, we need to really, really get our act together and do, like Werner Gerhard says. So the focus now is saying, how do we get greater representation of a diverse workforce within organizations? How do we create spaces for employees so that they are visible? How do we inspire everybody to be themselves at the workplace, be authentic, bring their whole selves to the workplace? I believe our strength as an organization, as I said earlier, is our people. and our priorities will always continue to be basic, very, very basic, because I think the evolution of the human race actually sort of hinges on that. And these are building capacity for emotional intelligence, embodying self awareness, huge one for leadership and for each one of us at whatever position we may be, compassion and sensitivity at the workplace, demonstrating awareness of how we personally impact others and our accountability through actions. Also, looking at the greater good. So, what is it that's good for self, others, and the organization? On this journey into growth and transformation, and as we step into the next stage of maturity, we can't lose sight of what I like to define as a very long expression of D&I, but I'm going to give you my definitions, and as we use them at TCS, to give you a slightly different lens. So we would define diversity as strength in our differences, moving beyond the case for sameness. And here is the big idea that I believe that diversity and sameness is actually on the same spectrum. Diversity at one end, sameness on the other. But there's a lot of uh, uh, bias for sameness. And the the difference that we're trying to make is saying, can we actually move into a conversation where we focus more on differences as being our major leverage? Equality, simple to understand, is a state of being equal, impartial opportunities, and right to progress for all, which basically means no one person is supporting another quite like themselves. But here is where it really gets interesting. Equity, and this was a definition a good friend of mine helped me come to, is recognizing specific needs and gifts of each person. This is such a beautiful definition because it allows us to support specifically rather than have a generic support system to say every person with disabilities will need XYZ. Well, that might be true, but what about the specific? Because I might have a specific need. And here's the interesting part: in some form or the other, we all belong to a diverse segment. If I were right now to take off my glasses, I wouldn't be able to see myself. And thus, I belong to a diverse segment, which is gender. I belong to a certain race and ethnicity. I have a certain physical disability. Um, and of course, we can't miss the big idea that I might be neurotypical, but I also might be neurodiverse in some ways. And for us to be able to claim all of this, we have to very honestly and very consciously address the idea that equity in an organization is to speak to each individual specifically, to recognize their gifts and to recognize their needs. Which brings me to inclusion. Inclusion, as I define it, is the act of providing equal access. Now, this is different from equality, where we said it's the state of being equal. Inclusion is where it actually, the rubber hits the road. The change happens. Act of providing equal access to opportunities and resources towards contributing fully to organizational success. Belonging is the power of being authentic and bringing that whole self to work, and also that ecosystem of ownership and accountability. Justice is gaining a lot of traction in the D&I conversations. And I think it's an important piece. Justice is about fair practices. It's about policies and systems that inspire open dialogue, open conversations, collaborative decision making. But here's the twist in the story, is that justice is not only about what we do, it's also about perception. So it's also about what we are communicating and how our employees are hearing us. Finally, all of this impacts culture, and culture is the character and personality of the organization. Somewhat defines the sum of all the parts: the traditions, the beliefs, the interactions, the behaviors, the attitude, the entire spectrum. It also drives talent, it drives engagement, impacts happiness and satisfaction, and eventually affects performance. Now, the reason I define these for you is that I have noticed in my own journey that I have defined different aspects of DNI, and should I say DNI be J, uh, over time in different ways. And that is the second stage again, because it sort of shows maturity of thought, change from the previous, and so on and so forth. So for us, if I were to sum it up, the year that comes that we've rolled into now focuses on increasing representation, ensuring protective policies, encouraging diverse communities to engage with each other and the ecosystem, building diverse community capability for personal resilience, professional growth, and strengthening a culture of inclusion. Uh, we work with five pillars that are important to us because we believe that they define to us, somewhat structure our work. Um, I'll start with the first one. We focus on engagement, and engagement is about our employee resource groups or affinity groups. It's about career and role progression. Representation, like I mentioned earlier, is about diverse recruitment. Sujaya mentioned it as well as an opportunity that she is providing as access to uh, a diverse workforce. Equitable allocation. Now, this is where it gets specific. Are we being able to allocate people basis their needs and their gifts? Supplier diversity is gaining a lot of traction. Again, a very important piece. In India, it's possibly not got as much attention yet, but given that supplier diversity has two levels and we service a lot of organizations outside uh, the Indian geography, supplier diversity is going to catch up very soon. It also speaks to not only our diversity, but those we work with. And it's a very interesting chain of change that is being brought in because what we're basically saying is that are you diverse as our partner? And are your partners further diverse or not? And then creating this cascade of accountability around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ecosystem is another important one because somewhat informs eventually it's all about the ecosystem. It's about the culture that I spoke of earlier, and Sujaya mentioned this as well. Now, inclusive behaviors, can we actually record them, measure them, besides, of course, advocating them and teaching them? It's about multiculturalism. Let's not forget that we live on a very versatile planet. Everybody is different. Cultures, nationalities, individuals, peoples, home cultures, food, languages, so on and so forth. And it's very critical that specifically leadership, if not, I would say all of us, need to have an idea of multiculturalism. I'd also bring in this big idea that I think is big is working on what I call workplace and workforce ethics. Now, workplace and workforce ethics is basically saying how adaptive are we to the culture of the land? What is it that people are looking for? And yet, at the same time, because it is eventually a both and, looking at what is the culture of our organization, what are the ethics, workplace ethics of our organization, and how do we blend the two? To give you a quick example, I was recently in Colombia, and calling somebody after work hours is considered to be rude. In fact, they have a law which says the law to disconnect after work hours. So it defines your workplace ethic. It defines your workforce ethic. It also defines how you as a leader are going to interact. So if I am coming from a different part of the world and I'm not aware of the workplace ethic within the land, then I might operate differently. But it's important for me to know, and that again goes back to multiculturalism. It goes back to basic human ethics around the workplace as well as our workforce. We focus on enablement a great deal, which is our global and local policies, accessibility, accommodation. And the final catch for me is this, what I like to call the development pillar. Now, the development pillar for me is to say that to change, we need to be intentional. And to be intentional, we need to learn. And to learn, we really need to put our head down and say, you know what, wherever I am needs improvement. So, Development is possibly our USP. To say a change is brought through learning how to be different. So, this is what I call the second stage. Now, the next stage, in my opinion, is the stage of sustainable human and social capital. And the pandemic has most certainly sharpened our focus on creating uh, what we call the community to CEO pipeline, to blur the boundaries, segregating that what we call social initiatives and structured workplaces. This all become one. All our social initiatives now are at the workplace. And to map commitments to our SDGs, to leave behind a legacy of inclusive growth, where every person in the organization has a voice and influences the decisions which are not only beneficial for themselves, but for the organization, for the community, for the environment, for the planet. No, but we have had a major advantage that our ethos as an organization was set by the vision of our founder, Sri Jamshedji Tata. And as a result, we know what we what we've got to sort of what's our path. We've got to stay on it. Now, in order to move towards this, um, the same pillars, of course, apply, but we ask ourselves specific questions, and these questions I think are important for all organizations. Uh, when I say representation and I say we're ensuring that all diversity identity segments are represented, the questions to ask yourself is, who are you hiring? How are you engaging? How are you allocating? How are you assigning roles? How are you supporting career progression of diverse people? What are your tier one and tier two? Your own diversity and the diversity of your vendors, your partners. What are these matrices that you report to your clients? Because that's where accountability seems to come in a major way. Again, when we look at ecosystem, you ask yourself questions around saying, what are the systems that we are providing for an equitable workplace for all diverse identity segments? And the questions you ask are, how do you lead? What is your culture? What are your, like I said, workplace and workforce ethics? How do you define leadership norms and behaviors? Because it all comes in together. How do we ensure bias-free workplace engagement? And what is your equity and parity index? Are you looking at that? Is that very clear? Moving on to if you look at how do you enable your workforce, you would say you need to create and connect networks of diverse communities so that they feel valued, they feel heard. Again, a question to ask yourself is, what are your policies at the global and local level? They might be different from one place to the other. And how do you create infrastructure and digital accessibility? How do you ensure that accommodation is provided to everybody, regardless of diversity, and everyone is able to participate in employment related activities? uh, how do you engage with people? How do you connect these networks of diverse communities so that they can move forward? Which is where you speak to how do you establish your ERGs? How do you create openness and expression of fair practices? How do our ERGs support representation? How do we work with ERGs on career progression, on mobility, on allocation, on promotion? What's interesting is that it's like a matrix. You can come at it from whichever angle, but you have to eventually cover all points because every aspect of DNI needs to be lifted so that you can actually get a result that you seek. Development, like I said, is one of my favorite. And again, the questions that I like to ask here is, how do we build inclusive behaviors, not only in our organization, but within the organization, within family systems, within society? How do we define that culture of equity? How do we learn to be multicultural? How do we enhance leadership behaviors? And you could use any format, be it coaching, be it mentoring, be it self-reflection, or others. How do we inspire transfer knowledge? Now, this is an important one because knowledge transfer is is important for an organization to come to a point of integration. And most people who are underrepresented in organizations feel that they are not in the game of knowledge transfer. They don't have mentors within the system. And this is another interesting one. How do we leverage inclusion for creativity, innovation, growth, and transformation? So these are some of the questions that I continue to ask myself and I think are important to me from the lens of the work I do. I would also like to reference that COVID-19 pandemic has upended the way we experience our work and the way we live our lives, even today. There's been a heightened consciousness about equity, inclusion, and diversity in the workplace. Uh, and Inclusion has now become a part of an everyday rhetoric. It's also got very closely tied in with well being because it's harder to include when you engage online. It's harder when you're working in virtual or even blended workspaces. And thus, the accountability and responsibility on us on how we listen, how we speak, what are the words we use are very, very critical. So, for instance, one of the features that we have worked on and implemented the last year and a half is inclusive language. What can we use and what can't we use? How do we speak and how do we not speak? When do we step in and when do we not? How do we hold space? Some of these are very critical in the current times, and the ecosystem, the larger ecosystem of the planet, is not giving us a choice to change. So it's no longer an invitation. Now it's not even a nudge. I have to say it's an absolute must. There is no choice in the matter. Now, some insights that I would share to gain momentum for those in early stages of their DNI journey. I would recommend that make sure that you have buy-in from top leadership, you have sponsorship, because that really helps move the needle much faster. Make sure you have a robust tracking and governance mechanism. Indulge and invest in sensitization, in trainings, in development of your people, because inclusion actually starts with self. When we learn how to include, uh, varying perspectives, multiple perspectives that come from different people, especially people who are different from us, that is where the journey actually starts. Focus on the idea of culture and multiculturalism. Recruit diverse talent. There is no getting away from that. Make that an important and imperative part of change because when you have people who are different, the ecosystem and the culture automatically alters. And bring your focus, I would say, to beyond gender, to people with disabilities, to neurodiversity, to generations, LGBTQ plus, race and ethnicity, and so on and so forth. Focus on your policies, look at accessibility and accommodation, and find a way to bring everybody together. We run them as D&I councils to track and implement the vision that you have set for yourself. I can go on this, but here's what I'd say to wrap up that the more structured your approach to D&I and the more integrated with business results, the better the possibility of you succeeding. What I'd say to organizations is that till the case is made by your teams for business impact, recognize that inclusion is a part of the business dynamic that your people are looking for, your employees are looking for, and your clients are seeking. And thus, bringing it together and leading it as an inclusive leader within the organization is really a call that we can't ignore anymore. I will hand it right back to Sujaya and request the next speaker to come in. And I'm always here for any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Preeti. That was outstanding. I can see the passion is palpable. We've exceeded the time, but I think this has been, worth everything that you actually put into this conversation. Thank you ever so much. I'm sure the audience is delirious with joy at all that they've received in this small window. I'm going to ask all the speakers to be a little more sensitive on the time because I just don't want our audience to lose the latter half of the program, which is what will happen if we exceed 6 p.m. So pretty wonderful, and we will come back with questions as time permits. At this stage, I'm really excited to hand this over to Tuba Mutasir of Citi.
Thanks very much. And, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'd also request the slides to be brought up, please, so that I'm just going to use those as anchors for our conversation. So they're not going to be very heavy to see, but just take you through the journey that we're seeing here at Citi. I'll step back a little bit and talk about the way we are seeing DE&I in financial services, because that's the industry that I belong to before we get into some of the more specific work that we've been doing at Citi in this space. I think as an industry, we are getting to a point with where we have a very progressive outlook towards diversity, equity, as well as inclusion. The great part is that our work conditions are conducive, right? So if you compare us to, let's say, other industries where the work conditions are a lot harder, unlike that, it is a great industry from a conducive work environment perspective to be able to do all of the work that we aspire to do in order to create a very diverse as well as an inclusive workplace. When it comes to women in leadership, I think financial services industry has really been a bit of a torchbearer, and there are so many examples of women CEOs in financial services in India, in banks especially, which I think is really remarkable. Some of our biggest banks, both private as well as multinational, have been led by women in India, and I think that is really noteworthy to see more women at top of the leadership levels. The other trend that I'm seeing in banking and financial services is far more visible advocacy and equity efforts. So, organizations are going out and becoming more vocal about what they advocate in this space and, the nature of efforts they are taking towards creating equitable work environments. And finally, no ecosystem or industry operates in isolation. And, in terms of the manner in which financial services gets impacted, the impact of technology is far reaching. And so very interestingly, we are also starting to see a lot of connectivity to themes around diverse talent in the STEM space, because there is so much work that's getting done in our industry as well, disruption that's coming through because of the impact of technology. So in that way, it's not really looking at diverse talent in financial services alone, but more broadly in the technology space as well. Moving on to, what it looks like at Citi. And before I actually talk a little bit about some of our focus areas and pillars, I'd spend a quick minute on our presence. At Citi in India, we are almost 25,000 employees strong in terms of our presence, and we're present in, all spectrums of banking. We also have a very large setup from a Citi Solution Centers perspective. And so we have very many employees based out of Citi India who work with, leaders and managers across the globe. Which means that when we think about diversity, it's not only about the very obvious strands of diversity, but cultural diversity starts to come into play. Mindsets start to come into play. And we look at diversity from a very, very broad lens in that sense of, all of the strands that get encompassed from a diversity standpoint. Now, our focus areas, if you will, are distilled into three key core elements. The first is increasing diverse representation. Second is building an inclusive work climate. And third is creating an equitable playing field for the talent that we have. When I look at having diverse representation, what is it that we really mean, right? It is really to say, look at all of the strands of diversity that we have, whether it is gender, whether it is LGBTQ, whether it is, cultural diversity, whether it is people with disabilities, and say, what is your very specific representation at this point? And how do you very, very, in a targeted manner, increase the representation that you have? So that's a huge focus area for us. And for us, we can make a lot of efforts across organizations, but the numbers tell a story. And for us, that's really something that we look at very, very closely. Women in leadership is an incredibly important theme, and how do we have more women at senior levels within the organization? Citi is one of the organizations globally that actually has declared representation goals. And in other geographies, of course, there's ethnicity as well. From an India standpoint, we're very focused on gender representation from an assistant vice president level and above. And so we track this number very, very closely. And I'm very happy to say that, over the last 3 years, we've seen a 12% growth in our representation. And, potentially sort of at the leading end in our industry around the representation of women at leadership levels. And then just having, in order to be able to have more representation and more people in leadership pipelines, you of course need to broaden your talent pool. So when we look at representation, we look not only at who do we have today, but what's the pool that is available out there in the market, and how do we broaden that talent pool? So we take quite a lot of efforts in the space of actually broadening our talent pool. And, for example, return to work programs for women is one of the manners in which we look at it, where, we're very proud to say we have a program where we have close to 200 women with career breaks who join us every year and go through a very structured journey. So the actual representation of diverse talent is a very, very core area to us. The second is, the inclusivity aspect. And I will say that we believe very firmly that the more emphasis you pay on diverse representation, it is equally important, if not more, to step up our efforts to make it an inclusive work environment. Now, there's a much used analogy to say, diversity is like inviting somebody to a party, but inclusivity is making them, enjoy the party, right? Or feel at home when they're there. And so creating the right climate is something that is incredibly critical from our perspective. So we do a massive amount of effort from an awareness and sensitization standpoint, which is to say, efforts like inclusive hiring training programs, respect at work conversations and trainings for individuals. How is it that you help people understand and see each other's point of view, understand what the other person may be going through, build empathy through the eyes of one another? Managers are really, torchbearers of what employees experience on the ground. And for us, the agenda is not limited to a few people in HR or a few leaders in the business. It is really about down to the last manager. How are you building capability for in each individual manager to be able to provide an inclusive experience, to their employees? As you can well imagine, with thousands of managers, that's not easy to do. Having said that, we believe it's an incredibly important part of the agenda in the manner in which we approach our work in inclusivity. And then in that space, making voices heard. What do I mean by that, right? How do you have systemic platforms and forums where people have the ability to come and voice their views and opinions, and to make them count? So our employee networks and resource groups are a great example of how we actually provide them with employees with avenues, not just to voice opinions, but to take action with regard to those, right? So we see some of the best ideas getting sparked through our employee networks, and we have affinity-led networks. So we have an LGBTQ pride network, we have gender networks, we have special abilities network. And so we see some breakthrough ideas coming bottom up into the organization through these networks, and a very good involvement from employees at all ends. And then from an equitable playing field standpoint, right? And Preeti mentioned this as well in her conversation, to say, how do you level it out, right? Not everybody is the same, and we don't want everybody to be the same. But do you have the right policies and processes and enablers in the organization to create a level playing field? A good example there is equalization of benefits. So, for the LGBTQ, we've equalized all benefits, for same-sex partners, for example. The other good example is to say, when women go on maternity leave, a decade ago, we put a policy in to say your performance rating gets protected when you go off on your maternity leave, so that you don't in some ways lose out in the journey, which is a very, very important life stage. So having the right policies, benefits, and processes, and when I say processes, I'll talk a little more about it later, but a very critical process in the organization is pay equity. Citi is also one of the few organizations that's gone out and published, pay equity data, which really means that we hold ourselves incredibly accountable to the community around how is it that we're paying equally, especially as far as gender goes, and do we have the right ecosystem and processes in place to ensure that year on year, we are ensuring there is equity of pay. And then, none of this operates in isolation. It is important to think about it as a community, and the community is not just Citi for us. The community is the broader ecosystem. And so what are we doing to level the playing field from an ecosystem standpoint or the broader community? Now at Citi, then how is it, that's a big agenda, as you can well imagine, and how is it that we kind of focus on this and make it come alive? We have certain levers of change, like we call them, and very, very simply put, it is really hiring more, retaining more, and developing and promoting more. So a lot of our efforts are split out in these pillars to say, what are the actions that we're doing in order to hire more talent? What are the actions that we're doing to retain diverse talent, across the organization? And those that we, of course, retain, the developing and the promoting, right? So not just to say, oh, we provide you with access and avenues to develop, but very, very focused manner, watch how how diverse talent grows within the organization. So for us, some of the things that we track very systematically here are performance ratings, for example, saying our performance ratings by gender equitable. Or, when we look at retention, we have a Voice of Employee survey and we get demographic cuts around it by gender, by sexual orientation if employees are willing to share that information. Um, and so it gives you a lens to say that, look, is a diverse employee feeling equally at home in this organization as, somebody else, right? So a lot of efforts that go in around the retention aspect as well as the promotion and the development. So right from training programs, development programs, mentoring, sponsorship, there is a host of efforts that go in across these pillars to ensure that we have a very sort of systematic approach towards actually increasing representation and ensuring that representation exists across the leadership layers within the organization. I think we come from an industry where numbers are pretty much everything, but metrics and measurement is very important. And so all of these, including the cultural aspects, including the inclusive environment, is underpinned by strong metrics and, measurement around it. So right from executive scorecards around these aspects, it's very, very clear and very, very transparent within the organization around what is the work that we are doing and how are we faring. And I think it's very important for us to understand and to be able to measure the progress that we make. Otherwise, it stays as a very high level dialogue. But how is it that we are actually looking at and assessing the results of what we do? So, these are some of the pillars and the manners in which we are approaching the work that we do. How do we keep it going? Look, that's an important question. The one thing we are very mindful of, and I heard Dr. Sujaya say it as well, is are you having a programmatic approach or is it ingrained in the DNA of the organization? Is it ingrained in the DNA of every individual? The manner in which we sustain our efforts is very importantly, as you can imagine, the right tone from the top, right from Jane Fraser, who is the only woman CEO of a global bank, down to the leaders within the organization at a country level, at a regional level. The tone from the top is incredibly clear around our commitment towards diversity, and we are very, very vocal about it. Having a right governance structure is also important because, as you can well imagine, some of these, when you want to translate them from messages to action, how is it going to happen? So we have a very strong governance structure with a huge amount of business involvement, a steering committee at the country level, a diversity council, which, by the way, is always chaired by a business person, in terms of how are we actually building strong governance around the work that we are doing and ensuring there is business involvement. Managers, like we spoke about earlier, play a very critical role, and so empowering managers. And then how do you harness the bottom-up sort of, power of this initiative, which is through our employee networks. So for us, the sustenance is as important. And, we are not keen on saying we launch new initiatives every single year. It's not about doing 50 new things, but saying year on year, are you seeing progress in all of the things that you start to do? And critically examine what does not work. I think that's as important as saying, no, we'll start a new program, but it's about what's working, what's not working, being honest with ourselves, looking at the environment and the industry peers. And then just finally, right, how is it that we even understand the impact, or what's the impact that we're trying to make in this space? I think to me, the impact, there is numbers, there is metrics, there is measurement, but ultimately the impact has to be much broader. And the lens that we look at it as is not just for ourselves, but for the industry. And, like I said, our talent is an intersection of industries. What is the work that we are doing in the space of breaking biases and barriers and fueling aspiration for diverse talent? There are lots of efforts that organizations make in this space. A very good example is Google's I Am Remarkable. Many of you may have experienced it, but it's a beautiful example of how, an organization can create a piece of work and make it available freely across organizations, across industries. And so a lot of the work that we do, for example, we visit, a campus in Pune called Cummins, where we run a program for over 200 women. Now, we don't go out and hire those 200 women at the end of that program. But for us, what we are giving to the community, the aspiration that we are fueling in these women over the span of the 6 odd months where we run the program is more important. So I think suffice it to say that the impact needs to be broader than what we do within the organization. Building diverse leaders, I think the diaspora of city leaders that sit across the industry is very, very important. And so limiting our impact not just to entry levels, but at a leadership level is very, very important. And then finally, look, when we're looking at it from the individual lens, what's in it for the individual? And we have clients of all kinds. So is our employee base reflecting our client base? Are we as diverse as our client groups are? Are we actually harnessing the full potential of the talent, right? So it's nice to say that everybody should sort of feel and bring their full selves to work. But the benefit, and that's the business case, right, is that as a result of everybody building their full self to work, you are able to harness the full potential of the talent that exists. So the impact and the opportunities lie in the same space as well. And this is something that we continue to be incredibly focused on, to say, impact not just yourselves, but the industry, ensure that, we're pushing diverse talent into leadership levels, and each and every individual within the organization, do they feel comfortable when they come into work? And are we able to take the best of their abilities? So with that, it's exactly 15 minutes. So, I'll pause here and, would be very happy to engage on questions as we go forward. I'll hand over Dr. Sajaya to you and to our next speaker. Thank you. Dr. Sujaya, you're on mute, not audible.
All right, Tuba, I just meant to say that was absolutely astounding. Thank you very much for keeping time, and also for the very, very rich conversation that you led here for the last 15 minutes. We'll circle back with some questions shortly. I want to, at this stage, pass the baton on to Aman Lal of Yum Brands. Aman, over to you. Aman, can we get you on? Okay, I think we're having a difficulty getting Aman in on board, so we'll try and loop him in as the last speaker. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move the baton on to Shatabdi Ghosh of John Deere India. Shatabdi, can you come in? Shatabdi, are you there? Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Okay, Shatabdi, over to you.
Thank you, Sujaya. So, hello everyone. I'm Shatabdi from the John Deere, India, and happy to talk to you about the D&I outlook for 2022 and beyond, based on what I feel is a very important journey for all of us. So, any guesses what this is? Nothing dire like the number of fatalities in the last 10 seconds or the like, yet this is consequential. This is the amount committed by companies as per the McKinsey report to increase efforts towards racial justice post George Floyd's murder. They took a stock of the monetary commitments from more than 1,100 companies and philanthropic institutions and found that companies have dedicated more than $200 billion to increase efforts towards racial justice since May 25, 2020. And this is only accounted for in money in reports, but I'm sure in spirit there is so much more out there. On one hand, this. On the other hand, the same report quotes that had the treatments and access been similar to white Americans, 22,000 more Black Americans would have been alive today. This disparity is profound. History today is telling us to take a note. Last few years' inequities are a result of long standing systemic inequities. But if you're thinking racism is not valid for India, do think of the friends that we have from Northeast or also the movie My Name is Khan. And how do we deal with this? No, you're not reading it wrong. It is very much reverse sexism. Reverse sexism is the term defined as prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination against men on the basis of their sex. So, this stance assumes that historic imbalance in the favor of men in contemporary era is no longer applicable, or that women are now viewed as superior gender. In fact, there have been lawsuits, and a lawsuit against the erstwhile CEO of Yahoo, where they alleged that she encouraged use of systems to accommodate management's subjective biases and personal opinions to detriment of Yahoo's male employees. Okay, that sounds a bit far. Closer home, are your pulse surveys screaming of this? Screaming of foul play in the name of equity? So, how do we attempt to address this? We'll come to it, but for now, I want you to respond to this on the chat. Who do you think were the beneficiaries of the Me Too movement? I know there might be some lag coming in, and would really like to hear from you. Is it men or is it women? Who do you think are the beneficiaries of the Me Too movement? If the answer is really coming in, which I can't see the chat right now, if the answers really coming in are women, if women were the beneficiaries of the Me Too movement, I think we are in for a surprise. And if it is men, well, I would really applaud the audience because it's proved to be right. Much against the popular belief, here are the facts. Have you heard of the Me Too backlash? When media began reporting the widespread sexual harassment and assault by powerful figures as a part of the Me Too movement that made a furore in the social media, many were heartened. The conventional wisdom was that bringing in the issue to the light and punishing those responsible would have a deterrent effect. But much against the popular belief, the outcomes were quite contrary. We know Me Too as a reality, but perhaps haven't heard of the Me Too backlash. I'll read out just a few for you from a report. More people, men and women included, stated that they will be reluctant to hire women for jobs that require close interactions, close interpersonal interactions with men. Men in general will be more reluctant to have one on one meetings with women with no one else present. In fact, as opposed to 2018, when the Me Too movement started taking shape, to 2019, when more results of the movement were visible, the results were even more stark. Researchers say that some of the behaviors are manifestations of what is sometimes called the no wife, no dinner rule, or the Mike Pence rule, a reference to men's refusal to dine with women colleagues unless their wife is present. In effect, the mass movement at a global scale that was really believed to have empowered women, given them a voice, has in fact had quite contrary results. One step ahead and 10 steps backwards. So, what has this done is that it limits mentoring and networking opportunities for women, which are essential to how workplace functions, isn't it? So, we've seen two dichotomies that lends DEI debates its canonical qualities. On one hand, we have the $200 billion invested to increase the racial equity efforts. On the other hand, were the efforts really showing ground results, we wouldn't have had the 22,000 number showing here, which was the 22,000 more Black Americans would have been alive. Similarly, on one hand, we have the majority population claiming that they are feeling marginalized as there is way too much being done for the fairer sex. On the other hand, the so called empowering efforts for women are backfiring and making us retract as a community. It makes me think, is the claim of reverse sexism even real? These dichotomies show that more needs to be done for coexistence, for diversity to be celebrated, for inclusion to thrive. But is there a solution? In 2022, it would be let's plunge in. There are three cases here. In interest of time, I'm going to ML today can recognize emotions in faces, in speech, predict social unrest 5 days before, predict outcomes of cases at Court of Human Rights with around 79% accuracy. And yet, I dare say, the prowess of the system is objectionable or questionable in the field of DEI. A lethal example comes from the tool used by courts in a nation to make parole decisions. The software measures the risk of a person to recommit another crime. Judges use this tool to decide whether to release an offender or to keep them in the prison. An investigation into the software found that biases against some nationalities. So the tool is likely to assign a higher risk score to offenders of a certain race and religion than others of the same profile. And similar findings have been made in other cases, such as AI system that judges beauty pageant winners, but are biased against dark-skinned contestants, or facial recognition softwares in digital cameras that over-predicts Asians as blinking. These biased predictions stem from the hidden or neglected biases in data or algorithm. So artificially intelligent, but humanly biased. So what? So why all of this? If you're wondering, so what? How does this impact me? Well, the reason I'm sharing these dichotomies is that we understand and differentiate between what's happening on the surface and what's the impact deep down there. It's time to go deeper and realize that there is an iceberg right ahead. So, how does one really go deeper? There are some red flags. If you read them just on the face value, you might say these are all diversity pro measures. What's wrong with them? But what do you think could be the concern with increasing DEI efforts? Backlash, as we just discussed. In reaction to the increasing focus on DEI, many HR leaders are reporting growing backlash. Are you facing that? What about hybrid work? That also sounds like pro diversity, doesn't it? As per a Gartner research, underrepresented employees are more likely to choose remote work over in-office work. That again makes their visibility suffer to the senior leaders. And what about remote work? So while we feel that remote work is empowering women and other minorities and giving them the flexibility, uh, well, virtual communication channels provide aggressors with the shelter from disapproving looks or reactions. And as per a CNBC report, 38% employees experienced harassment remotely through email, video conferencing, chat apps, or phones. So, what we're talking about when we're referring to remote harassment, it's the language that is used. Few anticipated that getting a peek inside each other's home can create fertile ground for sexual harassment, bullying, and other types of workplace harassment. So, how do we go about this? Well, simply improve data but do not alienate people. Building equity in all talent processes. Hybrid work is here to stay, but so are our talent processes. And think beyond pandemic and create lasting work from home policies. These are a few priorities that we can work on now because these are burning. But what about beyond? Let's look at representative leadership groups, address pay gap or transparency issues, diverse talent pipelines. It's time to address the elephant in the room and really go beyond our surface measures, really go beyond our program interventions, D&I interventions, and to build a sustainable DEI organization and society. That's it from me. Sujaya, over to you.
Hi, Shatabdi. I think it's a great presentation there. You've picked up some very insightful themes, and I think picked up some interesting trends. So thank you for bringing in that these fresh perspectives, even as many in the audience are planning their DEI interventions through 2022, 2023. We miss knowing more about John Deere's journey, but we'll park that for another time. But for now, thank you for sharing all of this. I'm going to, with that, pass the baton on to, like I said, Aman Lal of Yum. Aman, as I said, that we are great admirers of your journey, and I think this is an absolutely fabulous note on which to end the conversation here today. So over to you, Aman.
Dr. Sujaya, hi. Can you hear me and see me well?
Yes, absolutely. And also your
Wonderful. Thank
presentation.
you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Shatabdi Tuba, first of all, thank you for that wonderful presentation, and Dr. Sujaya for this opportunity. What I'm going to do today is share our learnings of this agenda that the learnings that we've had over the past 18 to 24 months since the time we've reignited this agenda in our organization. And I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Sujaya, for being a thought partner on this agenda and challenging us whenever it was required the most. So just to give you a bit of introduction of the organization, Yum Brands is the largest restaurant company in the world. We've got close to 53,500 restaurants, 3 iconic brands, KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and the company has recently acquired a brand in the US called the Habit Burger Grill. It's a burger chain, has around 300 restaurants in the US and some other parts of the world. In India, the business that we run, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, we've got close to 750 restaurants. Just the KFC restaurants I'm talking about, if you talk about Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, we are more than 1,000 restaurants in the country, and one of the fastest growing businesses in the Yum world. So as I said that we reignited our D&I journey approximately 18 to 24 months back. And in these 18 to 24 months, we've had some huge learnings that I wanted to share with the group. And these are purely our learnings, and many of you would be driving this agenda in your organizations. Maybe some of these benefit you as well. The 4 things that I wanted to talk about today. Number one, during this 18 to 24 months, we've realized that many organizations are in this journey of diversity and inclusion for various reasons. Sometimes it is just driving a CSR initiative. Sometimes it is the push of the global, if the organization is a global organization, there is push from the global side. But what I've realized is that if an organization wants to pursue this agenda and wants to make it sustainable and have business sponsorship for the longer term, it is important for the D&I agenda to mirror the customer diversity at workplace. And I'll talk about it in greater detail. The second one is the conscious choice the organizations have to make, whether they are in for equity or equality. And I'll talk about it in detail as well. The third one is, if you are in this journey and you're serious about it, how do you as an organization break some of the stereotypes? Because there are there are societal issues, there are mindset issues, and there are baggages that each one of us have. And those baggages come at the workplace as well. So how do we make sure that we break those stereotypes? And also, how do we grow role models in organically? And the reason I say so is that if we start growing role models organically, it might take us 200 plus years. And nobody would have the time and patience. And if we don't do it faster, and if we don't do it organically, the organization would continue to be a leaky bucket. And how do we manage that leaky bucket would become a bit of challenge for us. So we got to do it faster, and we got to do it inorganically. And we'll talk about that in detail. The last one here is building a ripple effect. Now, there are many HR heads, many diversity leaders who lead this agenda, and different organizations choose different people to, or different roles to lead this agenda. My counsel to every organization that is on this journey, or probably is going to be on this journey, is that how do you make sure that you involve your cross-functional partners in this journey? Not just, it can't be a standalone effort from the function that is driving it. You've got to involve your cross-functional partners. We'll talk about it in detail. How do you involve families? How do you involve customers in the journey? We'll talk about that as well. But so these are the four things I'm going to talk about. KFC in India is focused on two unique diversity sets. One, we run 34 stores in the country. Out of the 750 stores, we run 34 stores that are run by hearing and speech impaired employees. Our endeavor is to have 70 stores by 2024, which are run by hearing and speech impaired employees. And then the other diversity and inclusion agenda that we drive is around women. This is under the ambit of feeding people's potential. We'll talk about all the four lenses that I talked about. I would take you through the work that we do, both on the specially abled side as well as the agenda that we drive for gender diversity. Now, I talked about diversity at workplace to mirror diversity of our customers. It's very, very simple. You see, we've got 48% women in the country. And when we look at the KFC consumer set, this is the diversity which is coming to our restaurants as well. How do we make sure that we rightly understand the needs of the consumer? That to us is a very, very important thing. And how do we make sure that we build our organization in a way that we understand the needs of this diverse consumer that is coming to us? Otherwise, as a business, there is a tendency that we might even become irrelevant for some of these groups. So that's very, very important for us. And what we say and what we've observed over the last many, many years is that if we have more diversity in our restaurants, it translates into more business from families coming our way. It's as simple as that. And as I said initially, there are many organizations that pursue this agenda for different reasons. Some pursue it for just being a corporate social responsibility initiative. Some pursue the agenda because there is push from the global teams. But I feel that if you pursue it for the consumer, then the agenda can be long-term, sustainable for the organization as well as the diverse groups that you want to impact through this agenda. The second thing that I wanted to talk to this group is around equity versus equality. Now, traditionally, we all know that the organization systems and processes are built around equality. As HR guys, as people leaders, we build our systems around equality. And there's a long history to it. Our societies are built around equality. And so the question is, if one is less privileged than the other, is it fair to have equality, or there should be equity? And what do both of these mean? Equality is very simple. Everyone is treated the same, exactly in the same manner, and that's how we build our organization, our policies. But is there a need to relook at it? Is there a need to say that we will provide everyone what they need to be successful? And this is exactly what we do at YUM. I talked about the specially abled stores that we have, the 34 stores that we run that are run by hearing and speech impaired employees. So till a very, very long time, our agenda was very, very equality based. Let me give you a few examples. I mean, if you look at our homes, our kids go to school, they go to colleges, and we make sure that if they are weak in a particular subject, we probably send them for a tuition, or we appoint tutors for them. This is exactly what we've done in the last 18 to 24 months for our hearing and speech impaired employees. On the left-hand side of the slide, you see a sign language mentor that we've appointed. This is a lady by the name of Gaganpreet Kaur. She herself is born to parents who are hearing and speech impaired. So she understands not just the language, but she understands their world as well. The reason why we've appointed Gagan in this role as a sign language mentor is to make sure that if there are obstacles in the growth of our hearing and speech impaired employees, she helps them bridge those gaps. She helps them if there are training modules or learning modules where they get stuck. It is her job to make sure that they are on the right path and the obstacles are removed. For a very long time, we had training modules which were similar for all employees in the organization, whether they were hearing and speech impaired employees or just employees like you and me. But we realized that if we have to move from equality to equity, we have to make sure that we embed these learning modules with sign language. And that's what we've exactly done in the last 18 to 24 months. The third thing that I wanted to talk to this group is, as a leader, we are all privileged. It is our duty to make sure that we bring up the individuals who are underprivileged. And that's something which is not easy. There are stereotypes, there are biases that each one of us have, and we bring those biases to the workplace as well. And let me give you one example here. A few months back, maybe 6 months back or so, there is a role that we have in our supply chain team, which is around store equipment. This is a role that helps us work with vendors and develop the store equipment for our restaurants. When I asked my team, I said we would have to think unconventionally for this role, and we'll have to get a women leader to do this role for us. You know, the first response for many days, my team came back to me and said that, look, in an engineering college, in a class of 50, there are only 2 girls who pursue mechanical engineering these days. So it is very difficult to find an equipment engineer who comes from mechanical background and who's done the role of vendor development here. But I persisted with the team for the next few days, and guess what? When I persisted, they got me 20 resumes for the same position. So it is all about the mindset that each one of us brings to the table and how, as leaders, we break those stereotypes. And at KFC, we've done this in several ways. I mean, many of us would never imagine a women rider coming to our doorstep and handing us our favorite food. Or we employ a lot of hearing and speech impaired employees, but the normal stuff is that these guys can be at best be team members in a store. They can never grow to management positions. We've grown them. We've grown them to shift managers. We've grown them to assistant restaurant managers, and we are on the path to grow a few of them to restaurant managers, which is a big job, manages a big P&L, a big revenue, and a team of 20 to 25 people, not just special employees, but regular employees as well. There are times we say restaurant is a very, very difficult business. It's a tough business. There are certain processes which only men can do. We've literally gone ahead and opened stores which are all women stores. There are processes and systems that happen during night. For example, the inventory process, the material that comes into the store comes at night. And one of the major stereotype was that for some of this work or for some of these processes, we can't have women. We've broken that stereotypes, and we've got stores not just in many parts of the country, but a lot of stores in even Nepal, which are run by all women. And there are team members, there are shift managers, assistant managers, and restaurant managers. All the entire store is led by women. Let me share with you another very interesting video around breaking stereotypes.
Stereotypes. How we wish they didn't exist. And neither does Inderjeet. But seldom are differently abled people seen beyond labels of victimhood and incapability. Childhood wasn't fun and games for Inderjeet.
डॉक्टर को दिखाया लेके तो उन्होंने बोला ये बोल नहीं पाता, सुन नहीं पाता.
But now, he is seen as a symbol of potential, not pity. Inderjeet has been a team member at KFC since 2019.
मेरे बच्चे की बहुत अच्छी नौकरी लगी और वो अपने पैरों पे खड़ा है.
छोटा भाई होकर भी मेरी पूरी फैमिली को चला रहा है अभी. मुझे गर्व फील होता है कि वो KFC के अंदर वर्दी पहनकर जाता है वो यहाँ से. उन्होंने ऐसे बच्चों को भी जॉब देकर आगे बढ़ाने के लिए काम किया है.
I move on to the fourth point that I wanted to discuss, which is building role models inorganically. Now, as I said, that this is a journey of inequality, and this is the journey that we want to make sure that. So what happens in KFC or across the board is that we've got in our restaurants, we've got approximately 40% diversity at the team member level. But as they grow further in shift manager, assistant manager, or restaurant manager roles, this plateaus down significantly. And this leaves very few role models at the top. Now, this is happening because of various reasons, women being primary caregivers in the Indian society. So how do we make sure that we break this norm, and how do we make sure that there are enough role models at the top? Because if there are not enough role models at the top, the women below would not see role models, and they would not see beyond a point. And if they don't see growth, then they would attrite, which would mean that there would be a leaky bucket all the time. So it is imperative for us to grow those role models inorganically as well. So what we've done is, for a very, very senior role, which is called an area coach role. And area coach role is a role that is that leads 6 to 8 restaurants, manages a very, very large P&L, and manages a team size of approximately 120 to 160 people. For that role, we've partnered with Indian School of Hospitality, wherein we'll hire leaders, train them at Indian School of Hospitality. They'll go through a training at KFC, and then once the course of 12 to 18 months is complete, they'll get employed at KFC as area coaches. And that's how we've started building these role models inorganically. We also make sure that there are these role models are seen in our system. The more experienced role models in our system share stories, share their conversations, share their successes, share their failures with their junior teams, so that they can inspire those junior teams to take up bigger and better roles in the organization. Let me share with you a small video on this one. I'll keep it very, very short.
So Sarmishta, 10 years at KFC and 15 years of career. What kept you going?
I never took this job as like a job, but I always drive everything with my passion. When I got this opportunity to move from Delhi to Mumbai, it was definitely a challenging thing, moving your entire family along with you. But when you actually say yes to it, I think everything will fall in place. So I spoke to my family. My husband couldn't move immediately, but yes, within 3 months, he happened to move along with me, and now we all are together in Mumbai.
That was one great example of the challenge. And then how did you tackle with it? Because you very clearly knew what you wanted. That was the focus that you had. This is a very inspiring story, Sarmishta. And, you spoke about so many simple yet powerful tools. You talked about, outsourcing, delegating, seeing things from the right frame of mind or having the right mindset, whether it is about, picking up challenges, whether it is about not hearing the stories that the world was telling you because there were biases involved in it. You had your own goals and you found your own paths to kind of navigate through. Thank you so much. It was, just wonderful connecting with you today and learning so much about you and your life.
And the last one, how do you build a ripple effect? As I said, that there are many HR leaders who lead this journey of diversity and inclusion in their organizations, or there are some other functions. But I would say that whosoever leads this agenda, I can tell you with my experience over the last 18 to 24 months, you got to have allies. You got to have allies in different functions who support you in this agenda. And over the last 18 to 24 months, we do it across the organization. There are many leaders who've stood up in the organization and who've partnered in this journey with us, whether it is the marketing team, who's gone ahead and started partnering with the Deaf Cricket Association. So KFC now sponsors the Indian Deaf Cricket team. And this is just to make sure that we just do not have, we build role models for the country, but also we have role models for our team. All our ads now have become closed caption ads, so that a diverse section of of society can enjoy those advertisements as well. We are partnering with our business development team to make sure that our store designs are very welcoming for our customers. Our specially able teams need very, very different infrastructure in the stores. One such example is that we've partnered with our supply chain team, wherein the fryers that we have in which the chicken gets fried, fryers are built in a manner wherein there are light alarms for the special team members because they can't hear the buzzer. So there are lights which they can see, and they know that if this light is blinking, the chicken has been cooked. We've also partnered with our operations team because we've got both specially able teams in the store and we've got our regular teams in the stores as well. So it is imperative for our regular teams to learn sign language, and that's what our ops teams enable. So there are posters in our stores in the back of the house which talk about sign language, and any individual who can go there can learn some of the cues of sign language from there. The whole idea is to create an environment where these hearing and speech impaired team members feel really valued in our system. We also make sure that we engage with the families of these teams. I recently met, this is a gentleman called Kunal who works in our one of our stores in Delhi. Kunal is a hearing and speech impaired employee, and he's been with the company for the last 3 years. He's a team member currently, and he's pursuing his modules to become a shift manager. When I met him and his family around a month back, I got to know that when he goes back to work, he's literally going back, making some copious notes, trying to crack the shift manager modules. He's so passionate about his growth, and so is his family. So how can we make sure that we understand the reality of these team members, not just from them, not just at the workplace, but from their families as well, so that we can change our processes, our systems to provide that equity for them versus just the equality? How do we make sure that it's not just another job for them? How do they build long-term sustainable careers at KFC? And they grow. And one of my personal agenda is to make sure that we grow at least a couple of restaurant managers this year. And that's something that's so close to my heart, and I'm very, very passionate about it. Sharing, we also make sure that we involve our customers in this entire journey. And a few months back, there is something called a sign language day, which the country celebrates, which we made sure that we celebrate a sign language day in our restaurants. The way we celebrated sign language day in our restaurants was that we said that, look, the teams in this restaurant are hearing and speech impaired teams. Can customers without using speech, can they go mute and with the help of sign language convey what they want to convey? Whether it is their order or they want to pass on a message to the staff. Let me just share this video very quickly with you. For the many practitioners who are there, who are pursuing this journey in their respective organizations, I leave you with one final thought, that diversity and inclusion is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a journey. It's not a destination that you should be wanting to get to very, very quickly. It is a journey. Continue on that journey, and you'll slowly and gradually make progress if you have allies and if you have your heart at the right place. Thank you very much, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. If there are questions, I'll be very happy to answer.
Thank you, Aman. I think that was just incredible. I know that your journey is so rich. In fact, each of the speakers, your journeys are so rich that it's kind of unfair to ask you to pack it up in 15 minutes. But, thank you. I think, Aparna is summarizing it, saying, love the authenticity of this presentation, live examples with real people, beyond concepts and top level views. I couldn't echo this better, Aparna. This is, it's an absolute joy. You called out very generously the contribution of Capstone People Consulting and partnering with you on this journey. But I must say that what is incredible for us is how we see compassion in action every day with all of you. And your journey is just so authentic that it invariably, sort of inspires more action. So thank you, Aman, for that. I want to thank all the speakers. I think they've just been tremendous. And I'm just wondering, what the energy is in terms of being able to stay back for one or two questions. I know Preeti has a challenge in terms of being able to stay. Sunit, if you can let me know if Preeti is still here, because we do have a question for her. But meanwhile, because Aman, we've got you here, there are lots of effusive feedback on your presentation. You people have just done such an incredible job. And I did say to everyone that this is going to be very high point experience listening to you, and great note on which to end our conversations today. I'll take one of the questions which I'll basically address to you, because I'm not sure if Preeti is on the call or not. Sunit, you can let me know if she's still here, because there is one question for her. But I'm going to just quickly ask you one of the questions that one of the members of the audience asked, and I have been confronted with that question in the past, but I don't know your answer on it. And the question is that how do you deal with employees who don't believe in the D&I movement within the organization? Oftentimes, employees come up as basically the biggest critiques of what's going on under the aegis of building diverse and inclusive cultures. So I'm sure you've had your detractors in the journey. How do you handle that is a question.
That's a wonderful question. And Dr. Sujaya, there are many people who ask me this. I would say don't be worried about it. Don't be worried about it. Pursue on the path that you've chosen. There will be detractors in that path. That's okay. It's okay to have detractors. But when they see movement in the agenda, you've got to make sure that you inspire people through your agenda. And as you inspire people through your agenda, there are more and more people who will join the journey with you. So inspiring to me is the best way to take the agenda forward. There will be detractors. It is okay for detractors to be there, but as long as you are on your path and you don't get dejected by it, that's okay.
Right.
Go ahead
Right.
and have your leadership team along with you. Have people who probably come and challenge status quo in the journey. And for us, Dr. Sujaya has been a wonderful partner, because when we started our journey 18 to 24 months back, we thought we are God's gift to mankind. And Dr. Sujaya came in and she challenged us, and she helped us with carving out the agenda that we wanted to. And she brought in a very, very different perspective. So there will be detractors, but bring in an external perspective as well, because there are times when organizations, when you are a part of the organization, there will be limited hearing, or the limited appetite organizations will have to hear from you. But suddenly, if there is an external expert who comes in, boom, the external impact external impact can give a big impetus to the agenda, and that's what has happened in our case as well.
Thank you, Aman. I think you have a contagious journey of compassion within Yum Brands, and many congratulations for all the good work and the great work that you all are all doing internally. You're being very generous to attribute your success to an external partner. I think you can have some triggers externally, but you're basically already predisposed and aligned to compassion, and I think that's what you all have unleashed, a fountain of compassion inside your organization, where now everyone has joined into the movement. So thank you, Aman. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to ask the last question, just as a token for everyone who stayed back, because I know it's just been so rich just listening to the speakers. But I'll ask a last question, which is a question someone's asking, and I know we're a bit cynical here today, but these are important questions to ask. So Swati Vaidya is asking, and I'll try and direct this to Tuba if she's still online. So Sunit, if you can bring in Tuba. So the question is that, and I think what he's asking is diversity and inclusion, is this done to be able to, is it part of branding basically? That's what he's asking. Is it to be able to attract talent, and it's done to be able to attract business to yourself? And so basically he's asking about the authenticity of actually doing this, because you really want to build diverse and inclusive cultures. And I know you just shared an extremely rich presentation full of a lot of solid work, but I think there's still this whole skepticism, if you want to call it that, on what's the real purpose for why organizations may want to open up this Pandora's box, ask difficult questions to themselves. We're all chugging along fine. Why do we need to be able to upset the apple cart and the rest of that? And they seem that the conclusion seems to be that it's pretentious, not honest, and that it's actually being done as part of brand to be able to attract talent, and most certainly to be able to attract business. So can I get one of the speakers to be able to respond to this? Sunit, can you bring in Tuba? And if she's had to go off, Sunit, are you online? I think if she's dropped off, then I'm just going to ask. I'm going to bring in Aman to be able to respond to this. Aman, again, extension of the same thing that we just asked. But there seemed to be another question, which is not just employees not believing the agenda, but whether is this for employer branding? Is it for the purpose of being able to attract business to yourself?
That's a wonderful question, and we get asked this question many, many times. You see, back there in my room, there is a photograph wherein I was presenting at a CII conference a few years back, and I was asked the same question. And the question was asked a little differently, and the question was the way the question was asked was that what is the value the organization sees, or what is the monetary value that the organization sees in this? And I gave the same answer at CII conference, and I'm going to give the same answer today. At Yum Brands, nobody asks me whether the attrition of our special team is lower than the others, or whether their productivity is higher than some of the others. The productivity is certainly higher, because they contribute significantly more than anybody else. And that's something that we've seen. But nobody in the organization today has asked me about what is the value this agenda brings in. It is everybody in the organization wants to do it. Having 34 stores across the organization that are run by hearing and speech impaired employees, and having an internal commitment where these 34 can go up to 70 stores, it can all be done if leaders are inclined to this agenda from the heart.
Yes.
And we are in this from our heart, and it's nothing to do with brand building.
Right. Thank you so much for answering that. And for everyone who stayed back on this extended conversation, I must say it's extremely, difficult to interrupt rich conversations. And so we've allowed the speakers to be able to take more than the time that was allocated to them. They've had incredible stories to share here today, all real stories, all from the heart. And I'm sure extremely thought-provoking, timely, and relevant. So I think with that, thank you, Aman. Thank you, everyone, for being here, even the speakers who stepped out. Thank you for the patience of being able to stay on the extended conversation here today. And watch the space for more, everyone. And I hope you're leaving very, very inspired to be able to do more. So good luck with your diversity, equity, inclusion agendas. We'll keep the conversation going. Quick announcement for those who are there before we sign off. Do remember the best transformation stories of Asia post-COVID-19. This is a huge opportunity for you to be able to showcase your organization's change story, the 13 categories in which to be able to participate. Reach out to us if you want to use diversity balance hiring. Keep the movement going. Good luck, and thanks for joining us today. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.